Hey, welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where today we're talking about a Dr. Dolittle situation. We've got the Season of the Beast. And we're going to be talking about a Bardic Spy and onboarding new players, all here on Rise of the GM. How you doing today, Adam? I got myself really confused as I was looking at my playlist. I did the Dr. Dolittle situation, and I looked down right at the next thing, which was Season of the Beast, which is the Dr. Dolittle situation. Don't worry, everybody. It will go a lot smoother from here on out, I guarantee, because it can't go rougher. Well, it could.
No, it can. It can.
It always can go rougher. But how are you today, Adam?
I'm doing all right. I'm feeling it a little bit. I think this part of the semester is always a little tiresome. I don't know if you feel that right now, but
yes, again,
it's easy to think about Thanksgiving.
We're in the semestery things because we both are in college type occupations. And so we're definitely looking forward to giving some thanks with some food and some football on Thanksgiving and some gaming, maybe. I don't know. None of my family games.
Yeah, I probably won't on Thanksgiving either.
Yeah. So, but that's coming right up. We have a couple weeks before that to get through. I'm ready. And then the cool thing about, this college year, at least for us, is then we have a week of classes, a week of finals, and we're back into another break, and that is Christmas break. That's the good long one. Excited about that as well. Get my Christmas tree up, get my kids feeling like Christmas songs and Christmas movies. Oh, it's going to be a good time. So, but we're not there yet. Today we're talking about onboarding players into your group and into your campaign, and that's going to be exciting. But as always, we start with an encounter starter. This one having to do with the Season of the Beast.
Yeah.
Why don't you start that off for us, Adam? We'll read that and then talk about how we might integrate that and what we might do with it in our campaigns.
Yeah, for sure. One of the PCs wakes up to hear a beautiful voice singing outside of her window. Looking outside, she sees no one, just a bird on a nearby branch. The bird is joined by two more birds, and the singing voice becomes a chorus. The PC subsequently has many other instances of hearing voices when no one is there, until she finally realizes the truth. She now understands animal speech. Eventually, a rabbit asks the PC for help in freeing another rabbit from a trap. The rabbit will show the PC where a gold necklace is hidden if she helps him. After that, the PC is approached by many more animals asking for help. Most are incapable of comprehending the entirety of the situation and say only that, quote, the nature spirit said that she would help. Eventually, the PC is able to glean the nature of her newfound ability from what the little animals have said. She's been made an avatar of a nature spirit who is trapped somewhere and is unable to help itself. The tasks start out small. The PC stops a farmer from building a dam and gets him to build it downstream. Soon, however, they grow in scope. The PC might fight unnatural creatures that are killing everything in the forest, or keep hunters from discovering a secret grove and be rewarded with a drink of magical water. Eventually, the animals reveal that the nature spirit is trapped by a dark priest who has unearthed an evil shrine buried deep in the woods. The priest is raising an undead army and is using the nature spirit to power the shrine. The undead are already attacking towns near the shrine, and the PC will fend off an attack as she approaches it. The dark priest is at the shrine, surrounded by a large number of undead, and will fight to the death. If the priest is defeated and the shrine destroyed, the spirit is freed and offers either to take the power back from the PC or let her keep it as a reward. One good tactic is to give the PC two or three minor druidic powers and allow her to keep one upon completion. Scaling the scope, number, and type of encounters changes the feel of the plot. It can become a simple mission to save the spirit or a quest to save a god. With a few changes, the plot can work just as well for a traditional adventuring party, not just a single PC. So that's Season of the Beast.
Season of the Beast. I actually like this one. I like you first of all have to figure out which of your players you're going to target with this, because we always do parties. We don't do single player thing. I guess unless you're just dealing with somebody kind of catching up or making backstory, that kind of thing. But most of the time we're dealing with a party. And so you would have to kind of sprinkle this stuff in as she or he is beginning to figure out that they can talk to animals, so that they can understand animals. And there can be all kinds of fun with that. You know, hearing, like laying in bed at night and hearing what they think is neighbors arguing, but really it's the mice in the walls, you know, and
yeah, for sure.
you like don't explain things, but like give a few of those scenarios, and you'd have to come up with what would be really good ones until they absolutely figure out, wait a minute, that's that dog talking to me right now. That's that, you know, gopher or whatever. And then, you know, the whole thing about like there being, what I would do with this is I would have something else going on. And in that, as they're even going from place to place within a region, I wouldn't make this like if they're traveling across the continent, because I think they would get further away, unless of course you're dealing with a nature goddess that has been in, you know, but like if it's more local than that, if it's a shrine, but like as they're going, they begin to like pick up little bits, you know, these little things like the rabbit saying, hey, can you help me? There's a rabbit trapped. And they take time out to do that, but then they show them a necklace. And if you want it to be a little more than just like some cash and some coins, you can even put something with a little minor spell on it that was lost in the woods. They know where this is, and on and on. Now, what was weird for me is the fact that like it gets bigger and bigger, and pretty soon you find out that this spirit is trapped in a shrine. Seems like if the spirit could already have animals talk to you and they were trapped in a shrine, they would have like first thing said, you know, we need your help to come get me out of this shrine. You know, seems like seems like it'd be a little odd unless you could come up with a reason for why that is. And so then, you know, having to fight some undead that, you know, unrelated, you've heard that there have been attacks in this village, and then you guys have started helping, and then, oh, there's these undead. Oh, this is related. Oh, and now we got this big battle with the undead. I really like the idea, whether that's as far as you go, making it just, you know, at the completion of destroying that shrine, she's free and you get to keep one thing. Or you could, you know, you could always make it like somehow there's more of a link with that nature spirit. But I love the idea of not just a druidic spell of some sort, but like the talking to animals, because I feel like that's such a clever way for you as the GM to be able to clue people in on what's going on in localities, local places, wherever they go. If this is an innate thing now where you can talk to animals, you can use that to your advantage. Anytime they go someplace new, there's going to be rats on the boat. There's going to be a turtle in the pond. There's going to be, you know, and it's not like they can just say, I'm going to go out and find a wolf. Okay. Because even though they're like you know, they have this ability to talk, that doesn't make them like the great druid who can call animals to them. So you can even make it like, okay, you go out and you find a wolf, and the wolf like is like, what are you doing? Who are you? Why did you come find me? You know, they don't necessarily know anything, but you can have anyone that you want can know stuff. And so as you need to dribble information and drip information, animals are pretty much everywhere when it comes, you know, birds in forests and even in cities. So I like that as a special thing then that somebody always has. It's just kind of part of their character, and it makes them different than they probably would have thought as they're building their character. And of course, it's a great way to like introduce information into your party. So all in all, I give this one a thumbs up.
I like it with a character that actually wouldn't typically be like, it's like if the druid gets this, it's like, oh, that's kind of on brand and whatever. But like if you give it to somebody who they're like almost non-nature, you know, person, I think that's kind of an interesting piece of that too to play with a little bit. I struggle with it a little bit as like a thing that you could use as a party. I unless it's one of those like, okay, this is a kind of specific character arc and we're taking turns kind of seeing this, like maybe that could work. Okay. I guess it's the tying in of like, how does this fit into a larger
Are you
story?
talking about like seeing it more than just a single person?
It more so like if a single person in a party has this ability, like I mean, in a lot of ways that arc suddenly it becomes about them, which is fine, you know, but like you have to kind of be, I think, I like to be kind of clear and maybe I'm not as clear as I think I am, like with, the game we're in now, there have been moments where it's like, this is kind of this person's like spotlight, even though everybody's involved. This has to do with their story a little more. And so I actually like this. And like you said, me and you don't typically do, never have done. I don't know, I've done like a 2-player game, but not a single or like a
Yeah.
solo, like we've talked about with Eric before. But I think it fits better in that realm because you can really focus in on that player, kind of thing. So I think I'd struggle a little bit. I like it a lot. I think I would just struggle if it was like our traditional kind of group and one person has this ability. But maybe I'm
As
just
far as the
short-sighted on it.
arc, what I would do, and I said this before, is I would have another encounter that's happening with another goal, and they're doing that.
This
so
is
they have
part
to
of
go
that.
into this town and root out this mayor who is, helping the orcs get in, blah, 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 whatever. They're in the middle of that. And this player, I would just take a few moments and be like, you hear some arguing as you're going to sleep. They're really talking about like how the inn has let the food go and it's just not as good as it used to be and not as plentiful. And you're like, why are they yelling about this so loud? And you go to sleep. And then I would go on with the thing. And then a little later, it's like, yeah. And then in the midst of that, they might say, there's a rabbit in a trap over here. We need you to let it out. You'd have to pause your group as they're doing whatever it is they're doing. But the whole thing is you've got to have another goal going on in the beginning of this one, I would think. And then, of course, the whole party can join in on like, oh, we're killing undead and saving a town from undead.
Right.
That's something your party already might do. They go and then destroy the shrine. You get to keep the ability to talk to animals, and then that just kind of is something that helps throughout the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, that's true.
Is what I would say. So I wouldn't make it like, okay, we have to spend time focusing on you on this. I would make it very like interrupting.
Yeah.
Another thing.
It's the hook to the thing almost more with the cool result at the end. So yeah, I get that. Yeah, I love the durability stuff, in the Avatar kind of idea. I'm a big fan of that. I love them coming away with like extra unique things that were not part of who they, built, but were like were given to them because of helping out. I think that's really cool. I think from a GM standpoint too, it's interesting, and I'm not the greatest, but like it's interesting to play out animal mannerisms. Like that's like a different, kind of thing as the nonstop chattering squirrel, or the, sleepy possum or what, it's like whatever you can play that up in some cool ways, I think, to help get that across. And
that could be fun. Like you're in the middle of a swamp and it's like you guys are being like just like eaten alive by mosquitoes. Somebody, as the mosquitoes are coming in, roll me a dice to see if you can like swat them off of you or whatever. And if they roll and they're successful, and you're like, you hear, I have something that you would. Psh.
Yeah.
Oh no! And then it just let it be,
Yeah. I like that idea. And just like play. And you mentioned the wolf thing and being like, what are you doing here? I think it is interesting, like, and a good thing to remember if you do something like this is, we can talk to anybody. It's like if you can in a game, like your PCs are able to talk to anybody that's like a common speech kind of person, but that doesn't mean that they're going to just like do anything that they say just because they can interact with each other. And I think remembering that with animals too is like, okay, suddenly you can speak to them, but that doesn't mean you have control over animals. It means, you may have some jerks of animals that just are like, whatever, man, and like, don't care, and it's like, well, you can listen, you can speak to me, but I don't, I think that's important too. Cause I think it's easy when it's unique like that sometimes to just assume, oh yeah, like they're going to get along really well with these creatures now. And it's like, no, they may actually be worse off,
Maybe it forces them to like begin to take some animal handling.
Yeah, right.
I like this basically as something that makes somebody in the party unique. I'm always looking for like ways to do that for individual characters. Evan suggests a different way if you would want to. Maybe the nature spirit begins to slowly, it diffuses through the group. So one character begins to be able to speak with reptiles. Another finds out that they have bird speech. Another has were shark speech. That's ridiculous.
That's a good
Nobody
callback.
has were shark.
I love that callback.
It's not a real thing.
We need to go back and redo that encounter, I think, with the were sharks. I think it was well worth looking at again. So and even like, if there's a thing with I think that's an interesting idea. Or like after you get to the point where you've defeated the undead and the sorcerer and have freed the nature spirit, maybe there's some like boons even for people who took part in that, not like, it's like maybe the main person still has this stuff, but there are things that are a little more diffused, if they so desire, kind of deal. It's like, do you want to take us on? But I also do like the unique thing. And like, I tried to play with the avatar idea a little bit in my game. Like Raziel, is an avatar of Mistra, and like even the Pip being like a cleric of Saluni, like those I like that idea where there's that connection, kind of thing. So,
and I think what would be different is if like Saluni came and gave us. So you had who was the mask that gave us all a boon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when everybody gets a boon, then it just becomes like dealing with our power ups.
Right.
When one person gets something, it becomes identity.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
And I think that for me, that's why I would keep it one person. And then later I would like look for a way to like have a unique identity thing happen with another character from another place, another quadrant.
Right.
Because otherwise, if everybody got a little something, let's say everybody got speech, animal speech of some sort, then it just becomes like a stat on your sheet. And now I can talk to reptiles. So when we come across those, I'll do that. And when we come across birds, you do that. And there's no longer this sense of like, wow, I'm unique and this is part of my identity. It just becomes, we all have something and it's on my stat sheet.
Yeah.
So I very much, but that's kind of the way, the kind of player I am. I'm constantly looking for ways to make people feel like, man, my character was so unique that it'll never be like in another person's game. And even different than the other players in my party. I think that makes people happy.
Yeah. I think it's a good one. Season of the Beast.
There you go. Season of the Beast. Yep. Well, we're going to move on to our main topic. It's the onboarding of new players. What's that mean, Adam? What does it mean, onboarding new players?
Onboarding. So the idea that we're kind of going from here is, say you have an existing game you've been playing for some time, or even maybe it's like at a game break and you're starting something new. I think that could be another thing, but this maybe is a person coming into the group who hasn't been a part of that, prior. I think specifically like ongoing game, somebody new is joining the group is kind of where I'm coming from today.
Yeah, I think that's a more productive way for us to talk about it, because we've kind of started about like, what do you do when you're starting a campaign?
Yeah,
that would be like if somebody new were joining, but you were all starting a new campaign, it kind of would be what we talked about before.
Yeah.
But it's different if somebody comes in, they're like, hey, I hear you guys play, tabletop games.
Right.
Yeah. You want to join us? Yeah. Okay. Okay. How do we bring you into this campaign that's been going on? We're at level 11. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
How do we bring you in and onboard you?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think there's like both the kind of, I don't know, interpersonal prep, like not at the table onboarding that happens, but there's also the like, how do you connect them to a party at the table? Like both of those are important pieces of this that I think are like worth looking at. And just trying to figure out, it's like, how do you make that easy or smooth or like not this like weird situation? How do you help a player step into the game and like be comfortable and enjoy it, and it not to be like really clunky, I think is like the goal for me in those kind of things. So kind of want to talk in those two realms though, like outside of the table and like inside, not inside, at the table,
I
around
like
the
being
table,
inside the table.
inside the table, inside the game, those kind of deals. So, like the first thing I would start with is, well, even before this, before I spit out anything, I do think like we've talked before about, like maybe not every table is for every person, kind of
Right.
thing. And I do think that that's important to like work through some of that stuff. Like maybe it's worthwhile if somebody's wanting to like jump into a group that you know, play a one shot, or maybe like just play Settlers of Catan for a night and just like spend time together, kind of deal. Something along those lines where you can kind of get rapport before like saying, "Hey, we're gonna play for 2 years in this D&D game,"
And you're in.
Yeah, and
Oh,
you're
we
in.
hate the way you play.
Yeah, like I do think there's something to say about like is the table right for the player? Is the player right for the table, kind of thing. So that's kind of a pre thing. I think it's worth looking at though. But from like a GM, if I'm GMing somebody and they're going to be joining the game, like anything, we're going to start with like player creation. And I think maybe in that case, I would want a little more guidance even than normal. I don't know how you feel about that, but like they're stepping into an already established party. These people have those unique things that we were just talking about, of like, this is what makes this character. And it's not like suddenly this new person steps in and they are a flying gunslinger who it's like they are just like and it's like we don't want that. So there, I think,
Right.
some guidance there that maybe a little bit. How do you feel about that kind of just character creation stuff with a new person?
Right. Yeah. I think it, like you said, if they just build what they want, that's fine, as long as it doesn't like totally duplicate somebody else. Because one of two things is going to happen. The other person is going to be like, "Hey, you're kind of stealing my uniqueness." But secondly, they're going to come in. Let's say it's not total unique. Let's say you have Torgan, who is what is he, half orc? Who's strong, and his big thing is he hits things, so let's say you have somebody like that in the group, and this guy, he's different. He wants to pick like a, I don't know. I'm trying
Goliath fighter.
A Goliath, right? Who's different, but he comes in and he's going to like kind of be hitting people and can take, damage, whatever. Mm-hmm. When he comes in all likelihood, if he builds his character, he's not going to at the beginning be as good as, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, how you do makeup loot and makeup power, because everybody gets things that make him more powerful as they go. But he's going to come in, and every time he tries to do something, he's not going to be as successful as the guy who has kind of entrenched the makeup of his armor and his magic items and abilities to do this thing that he's doing for 11 levels. And so every time he's going to kind of, end up feeling like, well, I didn't do anything. He did everything I thought was cool. And so that's no good either. So you don't want to duplicate. So yes, I would let them tell me. I would say, tell me about like the kind of character you'd like to play, or give me 2 or 3 options of characters you would like to play. And if they, if I just ask for one and they told me that and it really sounded close to somebody else, I'd be like, the party already has some people like that. What's some other things you think would be really fun to play, until they hit upon something that was unique enough and exciting enough that we could then begin to talk about it, and I could help them get excited about that. But so I definitely would have that conversation with them. And then, as a GM, you have to, first of all, figure out where this person is in just like gaming at large, writ large. If they've been doing it their whole life, it's a lot easier to say, "Hey, give me some character ideas. Let's talk about them and about the party, and then we'll kind of bring you in." If they've never played, you're going to have to sit down and say, "Here's how an RPG works. You have stats, you have abilities, you have skills. These things all go up. We'll explain how this all works to you as you get going. We'll get you going." And I've had this before. Somebody who's brand new, and that doesn't mean you can't do it, because I've done it. But you have to then like explain like enough of it that they can build a good character because they know what they're trying to do stat wise. But then also so that when they first sit down at the table, they're not like completely lost and you're like, okay, what would you like to do? And they look at this sheet full of numbers and lines and they're like, I don't know. Or even like, okay, what's your, how do you sneak in? And they're like, I don't know. You would have to say, okay, give me a stealth roll if you think you're sneaking in, and then describe to me what that looks like. Again, stuff you do with your players, but you may have to do more.
Yeah. So, I think that's a good point to remember is that like not to just assume that, oh yeah, everybody's kind of at the same level of understanding of how this game works, kind of deal. So that is a really good point. From power level, like you mentioned that, and I think like swinging into that for a minute, my tendency, I don't really like, personally, and I think there's reasons you can do this, but I don't typically like in games I run for like players to be at different levels even, and I know that's like kind of a thing. Like I've been in games where, if you like missed, like if you didn't show up for the game, like you weren't getting experience points like everybody else who just did all these things. And so could sometimes be that change, or I'm pretty sure even in like that initial game WoW we played, like it was individually, it's like if I spent a bunch of time and killed all these crazy creatures that were attacking me and everyone else kind of just did nothing, I got a bunch of points while they were kind of not as many, and so that would like fluctuate. Part of it may be laziness, honestly, but like I want everybody also to be at a similar level and not feel like, oh, I'm like weak, kind of deal. So my tendency is if somebody new's coming in, then I like, if we're all level 11, I'm going to have them make a level 11 character. Like, is that kind of how you tend to function in your thought process with that too?
Yeah, typically if they're coming in, I'll have them come in at the same level. Now, what's going to happen is they're not going to be as powerful because, as I've said on here before, I give boons and relics and items, and they get extra feats and stuff. And so even if they build their character as best they can to match, they're not going to have all the same stuff that I've kind of been handing out along the way to the other players. And so they'll come in at the same quote level, and then I'll have to slowly begin to level them up. Now, the only time that I allow like kind of level disparities is if somebody does something and it knocks them back a level, because of the way the rule works. I don't feel like I've had that happen in
level drain or something like that.
Right. But we used to have it in like 3.5. You would have things that would do level drain, level damage or whatever. And maybe in Pathfinder too. But the cool thing is there's a story behind that they have to play out. I'm weaker now. And of course, in most systems, when you're weaker and you fight something, you gain more experience quicker and level up than somebody who is higher level fighting the same thing. You read about this in books. If you're not challenged, it's less experience to you. And so you don't have to necessarily go into all the numbers. You can just story wise, talk about how exhausted this player was who was like a level lower than everybody else or 2 levels lower than everybody else. But then like their body began to like adjust to it more, and they find themselves leveling up quicker.
Right.
To get back. But typically I'm going to have everybody, everybody is level 7. Everybody, you go up to level 8. I won't be like individually, you're level 8. You're still on level 6, but you're all the way up to level 10. That just gets like freaky hard to try and figure out. It gets hard enough already as a GM just because of people's builds and the items you maybe mistakenly gave them. When you've got somebody who is uber powerful, and this because it's happening in your game sometimes.
It happens
you got
all
this
the time.
dude who can do like 87 damage with one hit, and then you got another guy who whenever he hits he does a D8, and you're like, oh man, how do I even them out a little bit? So the last thing you want to do is have somebody up at level 10 and somebody else at level 7 or anything like that. That makes it too difficult.
That definitely is the way. And there may be like, I will say, I'm sure somebody out there is like, I really like the crunch of working through that and the challenge, maybe tables like that, and so if that's who you are, cool. I think we both land in that way though, of just like, it feels, I don't know if simpler is the right way, but like I don't want to be thinking about, am I about to paste this person because they're like 3 levels below? I've
Right.
been in that, and it's tough. But
right. Everybody else AC is so high that your monster has to be able to hit this high, and that dude's not, and you're like, oh yeah, you got hit hard. Sorry.
I do think another thing Matthew mentioned was it's kind of like the inherent, not the like rules leveling up that happens, but it's like what's inherent to just the adventuring and finding of treasure or items or boons or those kind of things, and how that really is a different, if that's part of your game, and for both of us it is, where we like to give those things out and make people cool and that kind of stuff. Like that is a big consideration for that. And I think that's something I know, like for Dormant Mind, like my main character was killed. I've come back in this other way, and that's something we were and will eventually like work through a little bit. I'm pretty content with where I'm at, but like that's the thing I remember you actually saying like, oh, I can tell that all the stuff that Cormac had, some of the stuff transferred because of shenanigans or whatever, but a lot of it didn't. So it's like kind of as is. And even though I'm like good with that, like we have had that conversation where, there's an obvious difference.
It's definitely a case where you're the same number level as everybody, but you're not the same power level.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And and that can be cool. And I like the idea of like the slow, more story things are happening to create those opportunities. When we had in the Jade Masks game, Raziel joined the game as coming in. That was a thing I was trying to think through, was like, okay, it's not just the number, okay, you're also level 9 now like everybody else, but it's like, okay, they've met 2 avatars of gods that have given them boons at this point. They have fought through all these things and collected different items. I can't just throw him in there, or it's going to be a pretty like a huge discrepancy in like the way that this is looking. So I do think like thinking through the plan of that, if you're working with somebody, it's like, okay, what could be, maybe there's like an ancestral weapon that was like something that's part of their story, or some kind of items that we give that maybe we wouldn't have at the very beginning, just to like bring that up, or a story boon, or have a plan for as the story progresses. That was something I keep bringing Raziel up because that's my latest, like opportunity with this, but he specifically was the avatar. I think I used that word out. No, not avatar, because that's everybody else. I can't remember what the word was. He was the physical embodiment of, which is totally an avatar, but it was like some other word for Mistra, out in the world kind of thing. And that was one of the ways.
Did use the word avatar.
Did I use that word avatar?
I thought
that's
so.
a lot of avatars out there. So it's an avatar of an avatar. Anyway, the whole point being, it was like Scion, I think, maybe sounds closer. Well, I'll have to look. But the whole idea was like, okay, part of that was a cool story moment, and it made sense. He's the magician, and like she's the matron of magic, and like this should be the way it connects. But also, it was like there is a discrepancy here, and people got boons that he has not gotten. So could there be this moment of like, okay, let's raise him up a little bit? That was in story, but I think part of that we can think through with backstory, or like, flashback kind of things that happen as well. So I think you brought that up, and I wanted to hammer on that a little longer, because I do think that that's a really important consideration when bringing somebody new in.
Right.
Rob
and
mentioned,
so that's like, go ahead.
I jumped ahead of it, but Rob mentioned, if a new PC is set on playing something similar to an existing PC, this was back our conversation earlier, I always recommend trying to synergize with the existing PC, pick things that make both of them awesome. And I think that's a good point to like think through too. If people are like, man, I really want to play a rogue. Well, we already have a rogue. There's ways to make that like work where it doesn't have to be, this is the exact same character that you're both playing kind of thing. So yeah.
And this gets into, something you try to do when you're starting a campaign fresh with a bunch of players. You try to like interweave some backstory so that when they come in, there's some stuff. So you might try to like look at some of the current players' backstories and see, is there a place where your backstory could interweave with those, even though you maybe haven't met yet?
Yeah.
And then, gives a sense of history. And that's, that's going to be getting into part of the table, but that's something you have to do before getting to the table. You have to think about like, what's my backstory and what are their backstories and how might they, how might they weave together?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that was my next kind of thought process, even for the outside, of we haven't come to the table yet with this new player. Is that story connection for sure? Like that's something I want to get them to a good place where it's like, this makes sense that your character would start adventuring with these people. You have an understanding of what's going on, but like that story, both from a like macro worldview, we've built this world, this person's a part of this world. Like, how is that true? And how's it connected? And we have this story going on within the world. How it makes a lot more sense if they are connected in some way. The people are hunting dragons and this person suddenly shows up and they're like, my village was ravaged by dragons and I've made an oath of vengeance upon them. I want to join you. Like it's like it. And again, that's not rare. You don't want to railroad people, but like there's ways to connect of like, okay, this is the arc that's already going, and it makes sense that this person would cross your path and join up in an important way. But also, I really like what you said about it's like not just the world story and not just theirs, but like how do these other characters interact? Because this is jumping a little bit to the table stuff, but like, are they connected already? Is it like my estranged brother suddenly shows up, or like this is a friend or a mentor or something, like maybe there's connections at that point that could be a cool way to tie them in.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got the before table stuff. The next part probably is the transition, right? And so this is where you have session 0.2, right? So you've had 0, and then you've had some like stuff with your players, and now you're having session 0.2 again, where you are kind of sitting down with everybody. This is the week before you start playing, or maybe the first hour of your playing, where you're like, okay, guys, here are some of the rules again. This is the way the table works. Here's the boundaries maybe that we have. We don't really get into things that are this, horror or this sexual or this whatever, whatever your lines and rules at your table are, and kind of have that session 0 of what people expect and what they're, and then, you move on. But that's like that transition point, and it maybe doesn't happen all the time. I've had, people come and join a game. We never really had a session 0.2. It's just kind of, they jumped in and, we went, from you create something before you get to the table to now you're playing without really having that. But that can be a good idea. Doesn't always have to happen. But especially if it's somebody you don't know well, it's not a bad idea to have a, session 0.2.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think that's good. And that being even like, I kind of deviated from what I was saying about the world, but I think that's a good point to give like current events, of like what's going on in the world. It's like, hey, like you would actually have heard these things. You're not just like popping out of a vacuum bag, like, hello, I have no idea what's going on, but
a vacuum bag, Eureka,
a vacuum sealed bag. I think I just need to say vacuum. But or like, unless it's the story, but it's not the person waking up in the hospital bed and they've been in a coma and then realize, oh, I don't know anything about what's going on. Like maybe that's like the story, but I think we sometimes do that where people show up and it's like, I have no idea what's going on in this world, but I'm here to play, and
right.
Which is like awesome from their standpoint, but like not the vacuum bag of holding. You just can never get out what you need.
But you can suck up everything.
Yeah. So once we're like at the table, I think that's like the second part of like how to onboard somebody. There's all these things we've talked about of like working through with character creation and making sure they're a good power level and connecting this new player to our other players, like in real life, not just like in a game setting, but like, actually getting to know each other a little bit, connecting the character to the story, all these things. We have that stuff, but then we're sitting at the table. We've had our session 0, our session 0.2. We're now at the table. It's the first session with the new included new player onboarding them thing. What needs to happen to get them connected? Like from your standpoint, is it's one thing to do all this stuff, but then now the party needs to gel. Are there things that you're thinking through with that?
Okay, first of all, if it's a new player, especially, I think it's a good idea to have somebody who's in the group. It's like the buddy system. You have one person who's going to kind of be your explainer. Sometimes you have a person who does that just naturally, right? Josh steps up next to this person. He's like, okay, no, this is where you look for that in this skill session here. Do this, we do this, whatever.
Yeah.
Somebody to kind of help explain and catch them up with what the story is and how the game works, the mechanics, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Also with that, kind of a mechanics buildup.
Right.
If it's a new person, you don't just start throwing everything at them at once. Do that gradually, introduce the game mechanics, and then explain them as you go. And this isn't as hard as it sounds, but like just make sure that as you're going through and you're like, okay, you guys are going to be sneaking in this place. That means you'll roll a stealth roll here for me, and you'll roll a D20 and add that number. Right. And then you go on with your story, and they begin to catch on to that pretty quickly. Yep. Some things are going to be harder, like concentration checks while casting spells and whatever, which I guess is not even a thing. Now you just have concentration spells, right? So you'll have that part. But then I think one of the biggest things we typically think of is how do you introduce them? There's the whole thing. You guys are in a bar and you look over across and there's a guy sitting at a table by himself. Okay, well, that's one way. Can be done. But find a way to create a scene that allows characters to interact with existing party members and begin to show what their personality is and what they care about. And so it's going to take just a bit of thought to think, what's that going to look like? You don't just like invite somebody to the table and then you're like, okay, you guys are entering the cave. And they're like, okay, where do I come in? Am I just going to be standing in the cave? How awkward. Yeah. Why am I in the cave? So as the GM, think about what's that scene going to look like? Where are you going to set that? And then again, if there's any of those background connections, that can help.
For sure. Yeah.
You can kind of play off of those. But you got to get that character integrated into the table. And as a GM, one of the things that I would typically want to do is in that first game, probably I would tailor encounters to the new person's character and skills. That way they get a chance to feel very involved right away. Your older players are going to know how to get involved and they're going to know how to well, my character does, and then pull something out that you didn't expect at all. They're not going to be shy typically, but that new person, they don't know everybody yet. They're not going to just take the reins probably. And if they do, that might be very off-putting to everybody if they're like, all right, guys, here's what we're doing. but so I would find a way to kind of tailor the encounter to their abilities, skills, and, help them get into that role playing. And I said this before, I would kind of do it best I could to get them level wise with what everybody else is. But I would recognize that there's going to have to be things that happen in the game where they kind of get wealth equalized or item equalized, and so I would be generous with them in kind of starting that up and getting to where I feel like they're as powerful as everybody else.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure.
I see you laughing at something in the chat. I couldn't tell what.
I'm just loving the chat today. It's good times. So firstly, I'm sorry to jump out of the line of thought right now.
Yep.
Vassal is the word I was using with Raziel. He was a vassal of Mystra. It's a little different, but he's a vassal.
He's a vassal.
The other thing, there are some really, really good and multi-system situations with this too, but there's really good like new, I don't know what would you call them exactly, but like it's like a quick start guide of like this is how you play, like that people put out for like 5e or Pathfinder or any, probably almost anything. There's something like that, and I've seen some really good use of those. I haven't done it particularly, but like I've seen some really good use of that, even like at like convention stuff, or like just people like showing it off of like this is how we bring new people in, where it's, you know, a double-sided piece of paper that's like, here's how you make these rolls if they say, you know, make a fortitude save or make a constitution save or something. Like that's a pretty cool thing that I think a lot of people are using right now. So that's good. And Ben here was asking, and he said you answered it, but you know, a campaign where there's levels of new people involved, should you default to the lowest familiarity level? I don't know that like I need to, if I'm playing with Matthew, I don't think I need to be telling you like, okay, so you need to make a constitution roll. And by the way, and I'm like pointing at it and you're like, I know, dude, you know, like it's, I don't need to do that. But sometimes I will sometimes talk like just generally to the table, you know, about like explaining something, usually for the sake of if somebody's doing something new, you know, or like once again we are grappling and no one remembers how to grapple because I don't remember how to grapple and now we have to look through it again, you know, of like talking through that kind of thing. Part of that's for myself too, where I'm like reminding that, but the gaming group I get to hang out with on, you know, Mondays sometimes here on campus, there's all manner of like people who've been playing, you know, most of their lives to people who just started playing 2 weeks ago for the first time. And I think like recognizing that, like, okay, this is like a brand new person. So there are going to be moments where I'm like, hey, like, you know, this is attack against your AC. Your AC is kind of middle of the page at the top. It's in that shield, you know, and like being able to say things like that, I think is like important. To know, you know, as a GM, like we actually know what a character sheet looks like and what skills are on it, you know, and things like that. Sometimes I get a little mixed up because I have so many different
gaming systems.
Games, you know, it's like systems. It's like, all right, I got to reframe my brain to Pathfinder tonight, you know, and do that. But knowing that going in and being able to explain, I think is important with that. But you mentioned, Matthew, what you were talking about before I derailed was like how that scene looks. And I really like that idea of having some discussion prior with the person coming in about like, what would you be doing? What could you be doing in this situation? And I just had like a question of like, that I would want to ask myself if somebody new is coming into the game. It's like where is the main group, what are they doing, and why would somebody be there, you know, kind of thing. I had read some stuff online, you know, just discussions about this, and there was a lot of like people who were like, no one would ever be in a cave, you know, that they're delving into. I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I think if we ask these questions about like, well, why would someone else be here, you know, I think we can come up with some pretty creative ideas for that, you know, especially if we're trying to route this, like these stories go together. They're not separate stories that we're trying to cram, but there's like there's a natural connection point, you know, that's happening. I think we can find good ways to do that. So I like that idea of just like thinking about that opening scene, not making the new person wait for 2 hours before they do anything is an important piece. Like,
right.
I feel like I've like at least heard of that before, where it's like you're brand new and you just like sit there It's like we never get there. It's like, no, I think if we're the GM, we can figure out a way to get them involved in the first 5 minutes, like 10 minutes. Like I don't think we should wait longer than that for sure. And if possible, like what if they met them in the first two, and like we can just like play this game together, I think is an important piece of that.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're thinking, Matthew, about like what's the like shtick that a new player is coming to the group with? I don't know if that makes sense, but like one example would be like they come to the group and they're like, I need help with X. Like, that's kind of like a way that they could connect. Like, are there other ones you kind of think of in terms of just more generic, not just like totally focused things that you feel like would work?
Yeah. You're in the cave as you're walking in to do whatever fighting. There's like a crevice, and you realize there's a hand sticking at it. When you get over there, the guy's like, "Shh, shh, there's monsters down there." And then like you find out that he came in here looking for mushrooms, or maybe he was brave and was wanting to fight monsters, but realized they were more than he could handle. And then the person he was with was killed, and now he has nobody else to be with. He's going to be with you. Okay. So the people I was with, family, friend, whatever, they died. Now I'm going to be with you. Okay. That one's not as strong because it's like, why would you just go be with people? Okay.
Yeah.
But how about like, I have a goal that instead of I need your help, I see what you guys are trying to do, and I've been trying to do that. And so, I think I can help you guys with something. Or let's see, I don't know. I'd have to.
Yeah.
I could probably make just about anything fit if I tried hard enough.
Yeah. I think like, and again, it's this is the story that the player's telling with their character too. So it's probably more on them, but I think like when we're offering maybe some like, here's some ideas, it's like, maybe they're a mercenary, and it's like, hopefully we tie it deeper in than that, as the story goes on, but it's a way to join the party, or ties to another character we brought up. You mentioned goals, and again, I was just like reading some conversations about this like this last week, and I have no idea who Lando Rasputin is, but they said it. It's a Reddit person, but they said this statement after a bunch of stuff that I thought was interesting, but this stuck with me. Same goal, different angle. Like I wrote that down after I saw that, because I'm like that's like a good way to think about this. Of they may be coming at it. They're obviously coming at it from a different angle, because this existing group, they may have been like charged by the gods to do this thing, and you have this person over here who's like, I just thought it was a good idea. It's like different angle. Those are like horrible examples, but like it's a different angle, but the goal is like coming together so that they can join, in an easy way. I really like what Rob says here too, with that kicking them off, or start with the new person and talk about how they meet the party. That's kind of an interesting, you see that in shows sometimes where you get the other point of view before something happens. And I think that's kind of an interesting piece that could engage the like existing people in a way where they're like excited to see what's going to happen after seeing what's happened prior to them even coming onto the scene. So that's a good idea. I like that. Yeah. Other thoughts on this?
I just keep thinking like, this group was charged by the gods, but this guy, he's only after this one sword that is enchanted. That's the whole thing he's after. And so it's very, selfish. But as they go through like everything that's going through, you as the GM, you're going to put that sword either at the very end, or like far enough along the way that they begin to form some bonds, so that when they get the sword, they're not like, okay, well, see you later. But they would then want to have other reasons to go on. But
for sure.
Yeah.
I do think there's one thing I wanted to say from this all, from a player standpoint, specifically if you are in a group, you're out there and you're like, we're actually having somebody join us. Like there's really, I don't feel like there's a reason to make this difficult. Like there may be some story stuff where it's like, okay, I'm untrusting. Maybe that's my character. I'm not a trusting person. I trust these people because we've been through all these adventures together. I don't know if I trust this person. I think you can play that out without making it like we're going to sit here for 5 hours and never actually like let this person play. Like that's different to me. And I think like being aware of that as a veteran player, whether it's to gaming in general or to the table, like let's bring people in too, and like help them to get into the game, even if the story is I don't trust them. Let's move on. Like let's go deeper into the dungeon. Let's travel to look for the sword, like whatever it is, and we can play those RP moments out, but like still let the game continue. And I think that happens sometimes where it's like I've seen that happen in like usually it's shorter term games, but it's like I'm gonna dig my heels down so deeply about how I don't like other people to come in that we actually are just gonna sit here and never play, and that's not cool. That's not fun for anybody either. So help the GM. That's what I'm saying there is like if you're a vet player, like help them out in those situations too.
Yeah, and as a GM, I think one of the biggest things you can do in onboarding a new player is to have an adaptability or a flexibility to your game. So you have an idea of where you want this to go. You're kind of bringing your party along. They're making choices, and it may, help you change things as you go there. You still have this end point in mind.
Yeah.
A new player comes in. Be prepared to adjust the campaign to accommodate that new player's goals.
Yeah. Right.
Dreams, preferences, styles of play. Be able to think, okay, what if things were different than how I had expected they're going to end, right? Because I'm also thinking of what, his end goal is. And so be prepared to, as a GM, let things morph, let things change from what you had before. Don't just say, okay, they have to go the same way as this party was who had kind of grown all along that I'm, kind of pushing
right. So. Yeah. It's, you add more variables into the mix and it can shift things in a really cool way. Yeah. I like that. Very cool.
So a lot of things you can think about some before, you can think about like the actual initial, and then after they get to the table, there's going to be the helping them along, bringing them up to the same power, the being flexible, making sure people are communicating with each other and with you, that whole feedback loop of encouraging open communication between players and the DM to discuss concerns or suggestions about how this person can, mesh with the party and with the people. And then, all that stuff. So, and then that flexibility again to your story as you go.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you have for like onboarding people?
Not at the moment.
Players.
Maybe there'll be some questions next week we can dig a little deeper into. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's jump to our NPC of the day. And I have to think that's me this week, right? The NPC. Yep. All right. So we have a bardic spy. It's a girl. Amethel Astrain. Amethel Astrain. Yeah. Say that. Bardic spy. She's just 5'3", very thin, still shapely built. Her face is cute, small nose framed by long, beautiful hair woven with dozens of small silver bells. Well-calloused fingers on her left hand, at least, where she normally holds and plays that finely crafted lute. When she lute, L-U-T-E, not L-O-O-T. When she's being enchanting, she lilts and half sings her responses. Everything sounds like a tale or a song, very epic, in the way she even speaks. In private, when she's just with her party, her vocabulary reflects years of travel at her father's side on the road. Some of the bawdiest phrases might slip out when she's angry. But she's the consummate entertainer, right? Able to complement a court's high tone with precise stress and restraint and poise. And you would just think she is the top of society. But, she can also, wherever she needs to be, whatever bar she needs to be in, whatever level, she can be at that too. She grew up the daughter of a wandering minstrel, and she wants more for her life, something more dignified for herself and her future children. And her background is that when she was approached by the Duke, asking to be his court bard, she was still rough from her roving youth, but her ambition was obvious, and so he didn't accept the offer directly when she came to him. I'm sorry, she approached him, and so he didn't accept her directly, but apprenticed her to his court bard. Between music lessons, she also learned and began to learn observation and ciphers from the Duke's, how do you say it, Sensei? And several months later, there is a staged fight with the Duke's bard, and now she travels the halls of power looking for a new patron that she can report on to the Duke. And so when I first read that part, I was like, what does that even mean? It sounds like the Duke has kind of encouraged her, maybe, or the bard that she was working with. It's like, you're not just a bard, you're going to be a spy. And so it's going to look like we got into a fight and you left, and you're looking for a new patron. But when you get that patron, you're then going to feed that information back to the Duke. And so you're gonna go be a bard now. You've learned the stuff you need to learn, but you're really a spy. That's like job number one. And so that's Amethel. And so what do you think of an NPC like that?
Yeah. I really like the spy part of that, like the end that was talked about. It's like all the other stuff, like having some depth to the character of like, okay, they have this like history of being on the road and kind of body stuff going on, but also can very easily slip into nobility and talk, with courtiers and things like that, and be very enchanting, is the word they use. I'm a big fan of the smallest detail, which is that there are dozens of small silver bells like woven into her hair. Like it's like that's like a cool, we talk about these NPCs. It's like something that sets them apart, and I think that's a really cool piece of that, of something small that you can do with an NPC that's like, okay, that's that person. And then when I think of them, I think of the jingling of bells, like in her hair kind of thing. That's a way to like connect. And I think we can think of NPCs that matter. They all matter. All NPCs matter, but like some of them we make up in the spot because somebody needs a tavern keeper in the moment, and it's like, I may not need to put these kind of details into that person who they're never going to see again. But if it's somebody who like may play a role, and I feel like this kind of character would play a longer role, I would hope, because there's a cool story behind it that I'd love for my players to unearth. I think that's pretty cool. I like that. It makes me think, it's not really the same thing, but for some reason her story immediately takes me to like the assassin books, like Assassin Apprentice, and some of the like just moving through nobility and places where these courtiers are and nobles are, and having kind of it's the spy part, is that, but life. That made me think of that. And that gives me some really good like fodder for how she could kind of be playing out. As far as like the connection to a group though, I could see her playing a part, but it's hard to get those secret pieces out without almost making her spy abilities seem not so good, because the party suddenly has figured it out. It's like how do you do that? And I don't know if you have thoughts on how to open that up a little bit more to them.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I'd have to think about it. It would depend on, if she's trying to keep that from them, or she like includes them in on, which why would you as a spy ever like bring more people into the circle of secrecy? Because all you're doing is like making it easier for your secret to get out. So yeah, I'd have to think on that.
Talking about fodder, I'm listening to, I've mentioned this before, but I'm listening to that Lightbringer series, the Brent Weeks Lightbringer series, and there's a character, and I don't want to spoil anything, so not too much, but there's a character that is like a spy for two groups that are at war with each other. And it's a very interesting, she's playing both sides, and it's pretty cool. And I feel like that would be an interesting, again, fodder for like creativity of using a character like this is pretty interesting. So how can that actually look? What kind of conversations does a person have with the people that they're trusting, but also can't say everything because they're also, the more you say, the more that's available to be used, and it gets dangerous. The more people you bring into it, it gets more dangerous. So, yeah, it's like there's cool stuff from a player standpoint. Like if you were kind of in this position that I feel like you could really have some fun with. But again, it's hard to do that within a party sometimes when it's like a solo person being like a very unique piece. So, but I'm going off the line here. So yeah.
So there you go, a bardic spy that you might be able to use in some sort in your stories, in your campaigns. And then here's the beautiful thing. Think about somebody like this as long-term, and that secret's not going to come out until the very end. That makes the payoff of that much greater.
Right.
If she's around for a long time, and the bells in her hair would make, you often talk about like you're standing in with the king and you hear a jingling coming down the hall. You're in the kitchens and a jingling comes wafting through the window as someone comes up and opens the door, blah, blah, blah. You play this idea that they've got these bells in their hair, and then like toward the very end, you find out that they've always had a spell that can silence them like in an instant and then make them. And so nobody's ever suspected they're the one that is this and blah, blah, blah. But
that's
let
cool.
that can be a character with payoff, but you got to be able to keep a secret for a long time.
Yeah. Hold it in, man. Hold it in.
Hold it in.
That's cool.
All right, let's run to our haversack, see what we got in the way of questions today.
Yep, we've got one from Wataya Hotel, or two questions in one. This is the haversack question, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them edition. He says, Dear Matthew and Adam, happy fall. I hope all is going well as you both progressed through the semester. As we approach the Thanksgiving season, I've got to say I'm pretty thankful for your podcasts. Well, thank you.
Hey.
Yeah. I've got some quick questions, and in an effort to give back, I have provided some interesting bestiary resources below. My questions are this. 1, what is one monster that you have always wanted to run in D&D but haven't had a chance to yet? Moreover, as a GM, this is the second question, what monster are you intimidated by? Meaning, which ones are you afraid to run due to TPK or being overly complicated? I'll stop there and we can talk about that a little bit.
Okay, let's think about this. I remember when I first started GMing, as probably many people who start playing D&D, I had this great desire to play the Beholder, because that was what was on the front of the book. That was like the iconic monster of D&D, was the Beholder with all the eyes and just floating. I did eventually use them, so it's not a case of I've always wanted to and I haven't had the chance. I have had the chance now. But that was like one of the early ones I remember that happening with. Most of the time, if I want to run a monster, I find a way to run it. I'm not too, I find ways to make things work, even if they seem out of place, if I really want that monster there. What I would say, though, as far as like, which one are you intimidated by because of either TPK or complexity? For me, it's typically more complexity. I've talked about having the ability to take a monster and either bring it down in power or boost it up in power to make it fit what I want, within reason. There's going to be some monsters that are so just amazing that they're not going to be like, I have an ancient red dragon that my level 2 characters can handle. That's not going to happen. But for me, typically it comes to a place of complexity. If it's an intelligent creature that has a whole list of spells, sometimes I think that would be really cool, but I find myself overwhelmed by the number of spells unless I decide, okay, the MO is they're going to run in shooting these 2 spells, and they're going to use this one if anybody gets close, and they're going to use this one at the end when they're just about to die. I pick out 3 or 4, and that's going to be it. But like those characters that have like huge list of different spells are often ones that I look at and I'm like, oh, that seems cool. And then I flip the page because
Yeah,
I'm in the mood for something much easier to understand as a GM.
Yeah.
There has to be occasions where I go through the pain of understanding those spells and how they would fight and how they would fight with the minions and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's, part of building a battle. For the most part, I build the simple creatures battles and I know how the tactics are going to run. Occasionally, I will take one of those complex people and figure out what am I going to do with these spells. But again, I generally pick 4, 5 spells at the outside that I think I'm going to use and in what situations I'm going to use them. I don't just know them well enough to be like, oh, so as everything is developing, this is the perfect spell. They turn, stone to mud right here. And I just looked through the list and found that one and it's perfect, So
Yeah, right. Yeah, man. So a thing with this question that I'll speak for Matthew also here, I think, is like we've ran a lot of sessions and a lot of games, and I think both of us like to just, not that we're just like going through every single monster, but we like to have a lot of variety in our games with as far as creatures. And I think you've brought it up, and I think for you particularly, you do a really good job of like templating things and changing things. I tend to be a little more straightforward, or I just like change the skin, use everything and just change the way it looks, kind of thing. But I think because of that, we've just used a lot of stuff, and so that question of like, what's one monster you've always wanted to run in D&D but haven't a chance to yet? Yeah, I struggle with that question. There's a group of monsters in the 5e book that every time I flip through it, I see, and I'm like, I really like to like do something with those. I don't know if this is exactly the answer to the question, but it's the slods.
SLAAD.
Yeah, slots.
I've used those.
Yeah, I've never. I don't think I've ever used those, and every time I see them, I'm like, that'd be super interesting to do something with. And then I just like flip on past, and they haven't like story wise made a reason, like, or made an appearance because of reasons, kind of thing. So I think like that may be one that I'd put in. I do struggle, I don't know if, again, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but within the, like, we've used a lot of creatures. There are things that I like had used or have used in the past that I feel like I didn't do a very good job of. Like I remember specifically a mind flayer fight in my first campaign that I basically just had a stand up fight with. And it's like, that's not how you use a mind flayer,
Right.
kind of like that. That's not a good, it was destructive for like a round. And then it was like, it's dead, kind of thing. And so I think like maybe a mind flayer is one that I'd like to come to at some point and like use better, because I think I could. And the beholder you mentioned, I really had fun using the beholder in 5e, which was actually that mask before the boon was given. That was in Mask's like abode, and there was a beholder there, and that was chosen to fight, as a guardian kind of thing. And I had a really good time. Whereas previously, I was always really kind of like unsure how to. It's like, oh, I got this like anti-magic cone thing going on, and then all these like spells that can go off, and which one do I use? And, it's like, I don't feel like I had done that well. And I enjoyed being able to use it and do it better the next time. And honestly, like even, recently there was a fight with a lich, and I felt really good about, giving the props again to the monsters know what they're doing. Like I like boned up on like, how could you use this really effectively, and brought that to bear. And it was like pretty tough fight, which I was glad for. So there's stuff like that.
By the way, those of you who weren't on before, Monsters Know What They're Doing is a website.
There's a website, and like I think there's actually printed books too that you can get if you want to be like, it's like a blog, kind of thing. But It's super helpful. So yeah, highly recommend that if you're
Gives you
particularly like a boss
tactics and
fight. Yeah.
strategies. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think particularly like a boss fight kind of thing, it's like super helpful. Uh, oh, I had an idea and I've lost it. Dragons honestly are one of those things that I feel like I haven't necessarily used well. And I would love another shot at getting into and being like, no, I actually feel like I know what I'm doing with this rather than just like claw, claw, wing, wing, tail, kind of thing. And
Bite.
bite, like, and sometimes a breath weapon, like using their magic abilities, being able to do that stuff. So,
I think
Evan,
part of what made the difference for me was when I first started, I got a monster manual and I would open it and flip through it and look. And that's when I could come across things and be like, oh, that's awesome. But that doesn't seem to fit where I'm at. The later, as things got more computerized, I found myself saying, okay, I need something that would be in a swamp area, water type, magic, and I'd put in these filters and it would just give me a list of stuff that would work there. And I would be like, oh, this one, this is awesome. And so I saw less of those things that didn't necessarily fit something I was looking for. And so I do think there is something good about like occasionally getting a book or a bestiary and just like going through and looking and thinking, oh, where could I use something like this? What would I use something like this in? Just kind of imagining, jotting notes. And then, you have this stuff you wouldn't necessarily go searching for that might be like really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It is nice to be able to see that. Evan brought up, he had a couple things here. Wanted to use an astral dreadnought since seeing them on various manuals of the planes covers. Those things are super cool. I've not yet used one. That would be awesome. He said they haven't incorporated enough planar travel and campaigns to justify using one. And then later said, I'm intimidated by any monster which require rules cross-referencing to use spellcasters of popular D20 systems, namely. And I think that's kind of the thing I was even getting at with like the Beholder or the dragons. It's especially like in the moment, sometimes it's like hard to be like, I'm going to flip through these books and figure out what's like a good use of this, and when with like the dragon, it's like, oh, I can do these physical attacks that are literally right here. But then you get to the end of the fight and it's like, that really wasn't what it should have been, because this should have been different. So I'd love some more opportunities at that.
There's I'm sure in modules you've all seen where it'll have like a monster or a named person or something, and they're minions, and it'll tell you. Then it'll have tactics. It'll say like this monster will fight until they're below 20% health, or whatever the number is, and then they'll run. Or these will fight to the death. Or this person will seek to get into the shadows and then disappear. That whole idea of tactics in the combat manager that I typically talk about on here, they had that with a lot of monsters. I think he just basically put in monsters from books and modules and stuff. And so sometimes you'd be looking at a module monster or a piece or like a person. No idea what the story was about, but he would still have the tactics in there about like, this is how this person fights. And those sorts of things can help, like especially with creatures where you're just tempted to bite, hit, smash. And then, you read, it's like he will use, shrinking ray first, and then he will go around using his electric stuff until this happens, at which point he will whatever. And it goes on.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me a lot of like the monsters know what they're doing. So that's cool that was like a part of that. To answer intimidated by, I'm currently intimidated by running a Titan of Chaos. And the joke about that is that's what's happening tonight. Which is also homebrew, kind of thing. But and that like, it's legitimate. I laugh, but like there is a pretty, like, it's not the apex of this whole thing, but like it's a pretty big like mountain here to go up against. And that's intimidating because for me, not to share too much to a player that's sitting right here, but like there's multiple stages, there's multiple things going on. You get into 5e and it's like layer actions and legendary actions and like all those. It's just a lot to remember. And I think like the intimidating factor for me comes into play. It's less about like, I don't want to kill everybody, but I also want it to be legitimate, and that balance is always a thing. But then like
what I has said, part of the chaos is the GM not knowing how to run it.
Yes, it's just like you open and point, and it's like this is what happens. Chaos. But I think like the juggling of multiple things, and that may be kind of what Evan's even getting at with like different cross referencing. It's like I don't want to get to the end of a fight because it's always like you get to the end of a fight as a GM and you're like, man, I forgot like 7 things that were all awesome. Like that's always kind of like disappointing, and I don't want that. That's the thing that kind of intimidates me about things like Titans and in my game, Titan and avatars of gods that maybe fought at some point. Like it's like making sure that it actually feels like this is that epic point. It's not just another creature that's just getting beat down and then moved on from kind of thing. So
right.
Yeah.
Knowing how to take advantage of all those cool things they can do so that it feels epic.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I felt like I had something I was going to say in the middle of all that. Oh, back when you could just take all of their powers and attacks and make a deck of cards and do like the was it the Necro in, or maybe it was Setback. Somebody had like the random, you would flip over a random card. I think it was
both of them.
Could have been both of them. Yeah.
Both. Yeah.
And so you just do that. You're like, okay, you flip over a card. Oh, this is the attack that happens.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. That takes a lot off your plate for sure. So yeah,
it definitely makes it chaotic.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like it. That was a good question. So Wataya goes on to say, after that, below I've included a link to a really cool website called A Book of Creatures, which is an ongoing blog that describes and catalogs mythical creatures from around the world, as well as reviewing non-RPG bestiaries. It's a really cool resource and offers a lot of inspiration. Additionally, I've also discovered a concept called, quote, fearsome critters, which were tall tales told by loggers in northwestern United States. Often these creatures were comical and outlandish. See the Splinter Cat, Squonk, or, oh man, Dungavenhuter, for example. But I think that they could be a perfect for D&D adaptations. I definitely recommend you look them up for inspiration and entertainment. In fact, someone named, quote, the Shady Mercantile has made a small booklet of 5e stat blocks for some of these creatures that I've included as well. Thank you for all you do in making GMing less of a fearsome creature than it seems to be. Sincerely, Wataya Hotel 98. So A Book of Creatures and Fearsome Critters booklet. I'm going to drop in the chat right now, but also this will be on our socials. I'll make sure to share that so that everybody gets a chance to take a look at those things too. That's really cool. I like the logging, the Northwest logging tall tales thing. That sounds really, really interesting. So I don't think I got everything in there. Shoot. Maybe it did.
View the last part of it.
It was. Hey, it all got there. Cool.
There you go.
I think it's one link though. That's the we'll see.
I don't know.
But yeah, awesome. Thanks Wataya Hotel for that, and have to check those out.
All right. Well, guys, we thank you for being on today. I think that's our last question in the Haversack today. We will be back next week. We probably will not be here the Thursday of Thanksgiving, but we have time before then. So we will see you before then next week as we talk about, what is it we're talking about?
We are starting a new thing about forces, different forces within our games, and this looking into NPCs and how they can join your party.
All right. NPCs, how they can join. All that next time on Rise of the GM.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks all.
See ya.